I think number three, and as we've talked about this, number three is probably one of my favorites, is just an insufficient understanding of business value, right? Everybody wants to know what their business is worth.
And I think everyone thinks it's this big, complicated algorithm, AI-driven methodology, and it's really not. It's a very simple formula for the most part.
It's going to sound really nutty, but we can do it on the back of a napkin.
And it's literally just EBITDA plus a range of values based on your quality of earnings.
Right. Now, most people and a lot of people are like, in the startup world, is we don't know what EBITDA is or EBITDA, right? It's earnings before interest and taxes and depreciation. And so basically a business value is based on the money you make times some range of value. I mean, it really is simple math. Or in some cases, if you're into a technology, it could be sales times some range of value.
But yeah, it's just some sort of revenue number, whichever one you want to pick, times 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever the range of value for your industry, area, business, and all that stuff. It's not complicated.
It's not. And I think, if we get into the real estate or maybe heavy industrial assets where you get discounted cash flows and that kind of stuff, most of the business we talk about have nothing to do with that. They're based on profits. People want to buy profits. So let's talk about, we understand profits, we understand it. Let's talk a little bit about range of values.
Yeah, that is the multiplier. That's where the magic is. That's where you have influence. That's where you can really take your business to the next level we call it quality of earnings. It's kind of how awesome is your revenue number, which goes back to the 4 C's.
Right. And so if you think about it, and let's just use an example of you're making $1 million in profit. And I look at the range of values. And what we found is a company that is struggling, maybe small, customer base or very centralized, they don't have a leadership team, heavily owner involved, they might get a 4X range of value. So that would value the business at $4 million. Versus we take somebody who's best in class, that has an operating team, that has a very strategic leadership teams, customer base is very diverse, owners not involved, they may get a range of value as high as 10X. And so now at 10X is 10 million in one business based on how they're running could go anywhere between $4 and $10 million.
Yeah, and we call that the value gap. And the good thing about the value gap is you control it. You can put mitigation techniques in place to drive that from a 2X to a 4X to a 6X to an 8X, depending on how much time you have and when you're looking to exit. So you have direct control over that factor.
Right. And that's where, when we do it, is yes, you can control profits. Or if we know, let's just, again, say industry average, private equity deal is going to be 7.5 times. Right? EBIT. And I'm making $1 million today. Well, we now know the business is worth $7 million. Pretty straightforward. But what if we could grow profits? What if we could be more strategic and we grow 1 million to 1.5? We now take that business just by increasing $500,000 in EBIT, a $3 million market value. I mean, that is huge.
Yeah, and the fun part of the math is you can mess with both sides of the formula, right? We can focus on increasing our EBITDA and revenue and all that while also increasing our multiple. So now you're double dipping and
you could go 3X, yeah, which is incredible. And that's why I said this one's my favorite. One is to actually bring in a coach or bring somebody outside, because the payback is going to be almost 10 to 1 on this. And it's so important. The other reason I think understanding valuations, because when I ask most people that, they really don't know and they'll throw some number out. Well, when you have unrealized expectations, if you think, oh, my business is worth, you got $1 million in profits and you say your business is worth 20 million, somehow you have to come up with a 20 range of values. And not many people get 20 times unless they have some patented. So you might want to talk about that.
Yeah. this is your baby, right? This is your kid. You started it probably from nothing. You've grown it. You're very attached to it. You're working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week for 20, 30 years. Of course, you're going to think it's worth $20 million, right? Unfortunately, we talked about it's simple math. Like there's no emotion really in this formula. They're going to look at your financials. They're going to look at your 4Cs. They're going to come up with a number and say, it's this times this multiple, and that's what your business is worth. You can think it's worth whatever you want, but until somebody strokes you a check, it's not worth anything.
It's not worth anything. And there's two other areas that we can help people. And there really are two other assessments. One is called the readiness assessment, right? So it can take a look at your business. And one is your business even ready to transition? And the second one is what's called attractiveness. And so you want to talk about those two assessments that we have?
And again, very simple surveys that just look at, are you ready and are you attractive? Readiness is an internal point of view, right? So it's how ready you think the business is to transfer. Attractiveness is an external point of view. So it's how attractive the business is to a potential buyer. So two different point of views, both looking at the same business. You may be ready, but not attractive. You may be attractive, not ready. You may be neither. And hopefully, if you're close to exiting, you're both. But again, that's where somebody like By Design can come in and help you create that road plan to get you ready and make you attractive so you get the highest multiple you can get.
And it's actually interesting based on those numbers. We've even seen companies that have 20 million in sales and probably up to 6 million in EBIT still not able to transition because of those scores.
Yeah. And again, it's partly financial, but 80% of it's your 4Cs, and your attractiveness isn't just the profit number. It's do you have a team in place? Do you have diversified clients? It's all the things we've talked about a million times.
Yeah. And so to me, again, I think if we could beat this one up, but I do think that understanding company value, what makes it up, is so important, not only just in if you're thinking about transitioning, but just every day running your business, having those things that at some point in time set yourself up for a transition.
Yeah, and knowing your value drivers and knowing your valuation, it just helps you make decisions day to day to better run your business.
Right. So let's talk about number 4.
Yeah, and this is kind of tied into number 1, but it's a little different in lack of a post-exit personal and financial plan. So number 1 was an exit plan for your business. This is more the owner, him or herself, having a personal and financial plan to exit, which I think a lot of folks don't even think about.
Well, this one strikes home for me. When we first, and I said I got the phone call, right? I get the first phone call and I wasn't ready and I didn't know. And so we got our first offer. Now, I was like a kid in a candy store. I never thought like somebody wanted our business, and it was a number. It was a great number. And yet when I sat down and finally let the emotions settle, and I sat down and I said, okay, here's the number. I got to split this with my partners. I also have another partner that we all have to remember is called Uncle Sam, and he takes his slice of the pie. And when I looked at it, I was like, I can't retire on this. Right? Because there's something called in the personal rule, the 4% rule. And basically it says whatever you have in the bank, you have to live on 4%. And so let's just say at the end of the day, the number comes out to $5 million. The 4% rule says that 4% of 5 million is $200,000. That means if you want to retire and not run out of money, you have to live on 4%. And I don't think people think through that number. They think, oh my gosh, 5 million is so much money. Yet when we do the 4% rule with them, they're like, and I went through that mental gymnastics and I was like, well, crap, I'm going to sell my business and I still got to go back to work.
Which is fine if you have a plan and you're selling this business to get money to go do something else, right? But again, it's by design. You looked at it and said, I can't do it, so that's not what I want to do. Someone else might have a plan that says, yeah, if I can get 5 million, that gets me closer to what I want to do next, so I'll do it. Again, you're doing it not by chance, you're doing it by design.
Right. And I've seen a lot of people in their personal life and their personal have saved money over time. So yes, they get money from the company, but they've also put other money aside, which then equals maybe twice that. And now they're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the personal plan is one that gets overlooked. Everyone's, oh, I'll just go play golf, right? Or I'll do whatever I want. That's the one you hear. What are you going to do? That's the great thing about retirement. Whatever I want. That's great for a few months, I think. But when you've been putting 50, 60 hours into something 20 years, you know, how many rounds of golf until you're like, okay, I'm kind of tired of playing golf. So having that personal plan of what you're going to do next, whether it be start another business like you're doing, or if it's, hey, we're going to travel around or whatever, just having that plan will help you focus on your goals and what you might need to.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the hardest ones because the financial number is easy. It's just math, right? At the end of the day, we can talk about return on investments. We can talk about the market, what's going on. But it is the 4% rule is just simple math. And I think we've talked about the wealth gap, where the wealth gap is what do I need to retire on and what do I have? So if I had 5 million, but I need 10 million, there's a 5 million wealth gap. Somehow I have to make that up. So that's simple math. I think the personal one gets interesting because even when we start to exit our business, to actually think like we're going to have a plan, I think it's tough. But what doesn't happen, and I think there was a great example where somebody was going to sell their business and we said, what are you going to do? And they said, we're going to move to Colorado. We're going to build a house in the mountains and we're going to live free. And we're like, have you ever lived out in the mountains? No. Have you ever lived where you had no neighbors? No. Like, why do you believe that that's really the next move? And sure enough, 6 months after building this massive house, living out where there was nobody, they went crazy and had to sell the property. So we have to be careful of, we create a fictitious dream that will never come.
Yeah. And it's why you got to be honest with yourself, right? And it's, are you really going to be happy up in the mountains by yourself, just you and your wife or whatever, whatever. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But again, the value is in the planning, right? Plans change, you may not end up, but just sitting down and asking the questions, I think really, really helps you get prepared for it.
I was actually, somebody gave me a book about this called The Second Mountain. And so I think as we sit down as owners, we need to start thinking about this when really our first mountain is building our business, right? We sacrifice almost everything to build this business. We go all in. We work 60, 70 hours a week. We face the stress. And when we sell, we've conquered that mountain. The question always is what's that second mountain? What was it, whether it's charity work, whether it's give back, it's mentoring, I think there is something to think about that second mountain. And it was a real gift to me. And, for me, it was to continue writing, to work with friends and family. And so, I think you have to look at that.
Good.